Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we start our first episode of Nostos, your journey back home. And I'd like to start with a simple question. Actually, two questions. Why does life feel easy at times and impossible at others? Why do some people seem to move through life, attracting opportunities, building healthy relationships, and creating success, while others feel like they're constantly pushing uphill? You see, most people assume it is luck. And in fact, some people are lucky, some people are unlucky, some people were born with advantages, while others weren't, right? But what if that's not the whole story? What if there is something deeper happening? Have you ever noticed that the same challenges tend to repeat themselves? Different relationships, same disappointment. Different job, same frustration. Different year, same feeling. At some point, we have to stop and ask ourselves, is life really random? Or are there patterns operating beneath the surface that we are simply not aware of? One of the biggest discoveries I've made through observing human behavior is this: most people spend their lives focused on getting what they want. For example, they want more love, more confidence, more money, more success, more recognition, more certainty, you name it. And there is nothing wrong with wanting those things. The problem is that most people focus entirely on acquiring them, and almost nobody asks a different question, a more important question. Am I actually prepared to sustain what I'm asking for? Think about it. Because getting something and keeping something are two completely different things. Receiving something and sustaining something are two completely different skills, right? So let me give you a real example. A friend of mine applied a set of principles that dramatically improved his trading results within a relatively short period of time. He made a substantial amount of money, but within a few years, most of that money was gone. Why? Was it because he didn't deserve it? Was it because he was unlucky? What do you think? What changed almost overnight was his financial potential. What did not change overnight was his financial capacity. His habits were the same. His relationship with money was the same. Even his decision making was the same. And as a result, the amount of money increased, but his ability to manage, protect, and sustain that money didn't. And eventually, life returned to a level that matched the financial capacity he had developed. And this pattern we see everywhere, in money, in relationships, in success, in confidence. I've seen so many cases where people sabotage their own success. Life can increase our opportunities in a blink of an eye, but capacity usually grows much more slowly. And when there is a gap between the two, that gap often becomes the source of our struggles. Think about it. Let me give you another way of thinking about this. Imagine a tree. Most people focus on the fruit. They want more fruit, better fruit, bigger fruit, and they want it now. But the health of the fruit depends on something we rarely see: the roots. And if the roots are shallow, the tree can only grow so much before it becomes unstable. If the roots are weak, the tree cannot support greater growth. But when the roots become deeper and stronger, the tree naturally becomes capable of supporting more branches, more leaves, and more fruit. Did you follow that? Because human growth works the same way. Most people focus on the visible results: relationship, the success, the money, the recognition. But those results are often supported by something invisible. What are they? Emotional resilience, self awareness, confidence. What else? Healthy boundaries, the ability to tolerate uncertainty. That's the one. The ability to recover from setbacks. In other words, psychological capacity. The stronger the roots, the greater the growth. So the tree can sustain. The greater the psychological capacity, the more fulfillment a person can sustain. And this is why some people get everything they wanted and still feel empty. The opportunity was never the problem, the capacity was. And that's why we're here tonight. Now, I have no voice. Let's talk about relationships. Because relationships make this principle easier to see. Imagine someone who desperately wants to be loved. They've wanted love their entire life. And they finally meet somebody wonderful, somebody who genuinely cares, somebody who is available, somebody who chooses them. At first, everything feels amazing, right? But then something starts happening. They begin overthinking, they begin doubting, they begin seeking reassurance. And whether you believe it or not, they become afraid of losing the relationship. And without realizing it, they start creating the very thing they fear. It's crazy, right? Not because they don't want to love, but because their desire for love became larger than their capacity to receive it. And this happens all the time. The same thing happens with success, the same thing happens with money, the same thing happens with confidence. You see that everything is connected, right? Ultimately, the same thing happens with opportunity. Life gives us exactly what we thought we wanted. And all of a sudden, we discover that becoming responsible for it feels much harder than obtaining it. That's why hard work alone is not enough. Now, this is important. Most people believe that if they struggle, they simply need to work harder, push harder, try harder, do more. But effort alone doesn't solve every problem. Because some problems are not about effort, they're about capacity. Again, capacity. You can work incredibly hard to build a business, but if you haven't developed the emotional capacity to handle uncertainty, pressure, criticism, responsibility, success itself may become overwhelming. You can also work incredibly hard to find a relationship, but if you haven't developed the capacity to trust, to communicate, and receive love, the relationship may never feel secure. And so you sabotage it. The challenge is not always getting what you want. The challenge is becoming the person who can sustain what you want. And this brings us to one of the biggest illusions in personal growth, the illusion of chasing. Most people are chasing, most people are taking from here, from there, and all this validation, approval, recognition, success, attention, love. And you know what is funny? They believe that once they get it, everything will finally fall into place. This is an illusion. Most people would assume that once financial problems disappear, life automatically becomes easier. Another illusion. But here's what I've noticed. You see, the more we depend on something outside of ourselves to feel whole, the more power we give it over us. Because if your worth depends on validation, you'll never have enough validation. If your worth depends on achievement, you'll never achieve enough. It never ends. If your worth depends on being chosen, I'm sorry to tell you the truth, but you'll spend your entire life afraid of your rejection. Real transformation begins when we stop asking, how do I get more? And start asking, how do I become more capable? What I mean by that, more capable of handling uncertainty, more capable of regulating emotions, more capable of building healthy relationships, recovering from setbacks, and trusting ourselves. Because the truth is, many of the things we are looking for are not as far as we think. The question is not always whether life is withholding them. The question is whether we've developed the capacity to receive them. And that's the whole point we are here tonight, Friday night. Not to chase more, not to chase anymore, not forcing anymore, not to become someone else, but expanding the capacity of the person you already are. Because when capacity expands, life begins to change. Not because something outside changed, but because you did. And that is where transformation begins. On that note, in the next episode, we'll explore how to expand your capacity to receive, sustain, and fully step into the life you're trying to create. Until then, reflect on this question. What in your life are you trying to obtain that you may not yet have the capacity to sustain?